I wrote the first book, I really couldn't let go of the information. It was just the stories were so wonderful that I decided this is really a historical fiction. What I did was put him in with all these battles in World War II from my research, so this is the nonfiction and this is the fiction, okay, so it is a young adult historical fiction because I used to teach 8th graders, so they always had the most wonderful questions for me. Well, how did they do that? So I wanted a book that they could read, because when you went to school, the textbooks were more or less just outlines. They never gave you the personal stories, the backstories. So that's what this is, an attempt to get kids to really understand what it was like to be a sailor in World War II. Okay, and as a history teacher, that's what I did. I dug up stories from when people who were there, no matter what we were talking about, civil rights, Civil War, American Revolution. So my favorite historian is Doris Carnes Goodwin, and she put it nicely. History should be the telling of stories about people who lived before us in the hope that we can learn from their struggles and their triumphs. And storytelling goes back to every civilization you can think of. It's that we learn from these stories, and we learn to, it's part of our heritage, really. So my background, I had a large family. On one side I had 25 first cousins, and on the other side I had 32 first cousins. So we were always getting together. That side is my father's side, this is my mother's side, and that's my family in the middle. So I grew up with lots and lots of stories and didn't really think anything of it, except I was one of the cousins, when everybody's running around outside and stuff. Oftentimes I'd come to the kitchen table and sit around with the adults, and there'd be nuts and cookies and coffee and all kinds of things. And my aunt or my uncle, my great aunts and great uncles would say to me, you think you got it rough when we were kids. Let me tell you how rough it was when we were kids. So, and I would listen. I did not know I had a sense of history back then, but I remembered their stories and didn't think to record them until I was in college. And that's when I grabbed the tape recorder. And, the little cassette tapes that snap, so you had to be very careful with them. But that's when I started recording grandparents and parents and so on, and really getting their stories down. And when I whenever I did any unit of study with students, I would pull out personal stories. Like I chose here the Civil Rights Movement. How long the Civil Rights Movement lasts, I had a dream, we shall overcome, that kind of stuff. But to get a story like from this woman here, Elizabeth Eckford, she's still alive. She's one of the ones that helped desegregate a high school in Arkansas and Little Rock. And if you read her story, she wrote a book, and so I took excerpts from the book, and you could see how they're screaming at her. You could just imagine the stress it took for her to go to school every single day. And then once she got in the building, it didn't stop. They would trip her in the aisle. One couple of girls in the bathroom lit a match and put a paper on fire and threw it at her in the stall. They would do all kinds of things. And, my students would just say, I never knew how bad it was. And again, this is Elizabeth Mooney, her name is, and she just passed away, but here she is trying to desegregate Woolworths. And you can see what they're doing to her. They're young people at the counter, they're dumping mustard and ketchup all over her. And then they arrest her because black people were not allowed to sit at the counter. So she got arrested with her hair like that, and she had to sleep overnight in a jail with her hair all crusty. She was not able to wash it. So, kids then, the empathy comes out. They start saying, wow, what it took. And people like John Lewis taught his people how to withstand, how to control their rage when they were out trying to do civil disobedience. So I saw how powerful stories are, and I started using them more and more in my teaching. So after 40 years, after my career, my kids, my aging parents, I started really thinking about, this is when I wrote the books, this is when I retired, and I just realized how remarkable my family stories were. And so I began digging. And after my parents died, I got a knock on the door, and my brother showed up with 4 boxes. He said, well, you just moved into a new house, so here's some boxes. I don't have any room for them. And they were all memorabilia from my parents, photographs and documents and whatever. And I didn't have time to look at them until I retired. And then what I found just got me going with other research. So I started to listen to relatives. I started calling them down. By then they were in their 90s, and I started saying, okay, so tell me what it was like, and then old people, none of us, kids don't really want to know about your life, so when someone calls you and asks you about your life, they start talking. I had an aunt, she lived to be 100, and we talked almost every other night for about 45 minutes at a time, and she just went on and on with stories. So, and I'm sitting there, recording them. So I also read a lot of written and online personal accounts, especially after World War II. They started to interview sailors and soldiers, what their experiences were. And so I got a lot of information from there because, as you know, a lot of veterans just don't want to talk about what they saw, okay? So, and that's what happened to me. I had no idea. My father was a 20-year Navy man, and I had no idea where he was, what he saw, okay, until I saw his Navy log. So I also started preserving some artifacts, which I'll pass around right now with you. Let's see, he was a torpedoman, head torpedoman, and he had this with him. This is a gyroscope, and actually I found it in a torpedo museum in North Carolina, the same one. He had this with him all his life, and it was in his last house that he was in. I go, this must have been very important to him in order for him to save this. So he was very enamored by the gyroscope, and it spins, and this is how boats and planes and ships, by the spinning, controls the torpedo, and it steadies it through the water. So it's pretty heavy, but I can pass it around if you want to. Just be careful with it, it's in parts.
Karen, can I add something at this moment?
Yeah.
Because the gyroscope was invented by Elmer Sperry, who is in our Hall of Fame.
Yes.
And Sperry, the Sperry building in Cortland State is...
Yes, I knew that, I just forgot to add that. Thank you. This is a prototype of a torpedo, and this very torpedo is in my father's hands. He's about 19 years old in this picture. So again, he kept it, and I'm like, someone made this for him, it must have been very important to him, and he learned all about torpedoes, the chemical, mechanical type torpedoes. And they used to load them by hand. Now they automatically load them. So be very careful, it's pretty heavy. This was a find. This is a flashing mirror that pilots kept around their necks. So if they're shot down in the ocean, there's a cross, and you'll see the cross when I pass it around, but they hold it up to the sun, and if the cross shines onto their chest, then that means that they'll be able to flash, and so this is how that boats can locate them. Okay. So these are like, 80 years old, some of these items. My dad had a whole set of these down the cellar. And, when we cleaned out his house, I just couldn't take all of them. So I took one. And it just so happened that I took Torpedoman's mate one and Chief Torpedoman, which he ended up becoming. So this is where I learned all about World War II torpedoes, was from this book. There's a name for this craft, and someone told me it was very popular in the 40s and the early 50s, and I guess sailors started doing it, and I don't know how it works. I guess there's some kind of machine that you use, but he made this, sometimes sailors get bored. He played a lot of checkers and chess, but this was one of the things that he made, and I salvaged this one.
That thing's kind of heavy.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy. And this is just a newspaper article. One time when I was like 7 years old, a reporter came to our house and a cameraman, and they wanted to interview him on the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. So this is an article that I saved. There's a Okay, so my gem that I found was a diary from a sailor on the USS Abbott. It was a destroyer very similar to the one my dad was on. And I printed out from online on a website, I printed out his diary, and it was like this thick. And it was the most heartwarming diary that I've ever read. And he just was very, very meticulous in explaining. He probably was in every single battle that my dad was in, so I was able to picture what it was like. The other big find was the Navy log. If you open it up, it opens up like an accordion. So when sailors muster on a ship, they have to have this Navy log with them. And they put every single battle you were in, any advancement that you had, any hospitalization that you had. So I could tell you exactly where he was during the war, because of this Navy log. So what is a shellback? Anybody know what a shellback is?
You cross the equator.
Exactly. When you're a Navy recruit, you're, may I take it? When you're a Navy recruit, you're a polywog. A polywog is a baby fish or toad. So when you cross the equator, you're initiated, and it's actually hazing is what it is. And they initiate you as a shellback. A shellback unit is a hard covering. You become an old salt. You become a salty qualified. And this tradition started 400 years ago through the British Navy. And the initiation was quite brutal. And now it has evolved to like a picnic now. But they still had the hazing in World War II as well. And I think Karen here has some pictures of her father being hazed. This is one of the pictures of the shellback. So the polywogs have to dress up like whatever they tell you. You're gonna dress up like a woman, a hula dancer, you have to sing a song, tell a poem, and so as you can see, they're all dressed up. And here's a picture of a sailor getting married, and my father's the judge marrying him. And then when you're done with the initiation, it's only 2 days, you get a certificate. And in Utica, when I was at the Oneida County History Center, there was like 2 sailors that brought their certificates. They had to show us that they were qualified shellbacks. You know, it was a real honor to be initiated. And it's after Neptune, the goddess of the sea. So when you read Shellback, it's in 2 parts. Part 1 it talks about Francis. He's the protagonist. He's a youth. He's 10 years old. He is a child of Italian immigrants. Okay, he's the oldest in the family. There's 6 kids in the family. No English is spoken in the house until later on after he goes to school. You know, he starts learning English. So the poverty, I mean, sometimes there's near starvation. It was very hard. If they didn't pay their electric bill or their heat bill, they would get taken out. During the Depression, they had their houses foreclosed. So very, very, very rough time, especially for immigrants at that time. And as a young age, he'd say, I gotta get out of here. I've got to get a better life. And he, in his mind, he thought, if I left Utica, I'm going to find a better life, is what he thought. And then a terrible thing happened to his dad, who was an unskilled bull worker. He worked on construction. He was in the brickyards. He was a short, stocky, very strong man. But he was buried alive in a construction site. And he was buried for 45 minutes. It took them 45 minutes to get him. And the only reason why he didn't smother to death was they were laying pipelines, and so he had his head in a pipe so he was able to breathe. But when they brought him up, he had broken both arms, both legs, and his collarbone. So that set them back very much. There was no workman's compensation back then, or unemployment insurance, nothing like that. So the mother had to go to work. She made like $10 a week. And so the family helped out, but everybody was struggling at this point. So he had a lot of responsibility as far as bringing pennies, money into the family as much as he could. So he got into other jobs, like every summer, this is where the bean picker came from. Every summer they would get on an open back truck, and about 45 minutes away, like in Vernon or Deansboro, they would pick peas and beans. But because they didn't commute back and forth, they had to live in the shacks that were built by the farmers, okay? So he did this every summer until he was 18 years old, and with the whole family. And there was no daycare, so, you know, moms took their babies with them, their small children with them. They were all out there in the fields, okay? I had an uncle who illegally bootlegged. He just didn't want to do field work. He didn't want to do factory work. He wanted to make a quick buck, so it was just too tempting because Prohibition had been going on in the 30s, and he gets caught bootlegging and gets kicked out of Utica. He almost got deported, but he didn't. I had another uncle that played baseball. He was a really, really good baseball player, and the Buffalo Bisons hired him, gave him a contract to play in a minor league. And he's saying, oh, I'm out of here, I'm going to be in the major leagues. And then he cut off 2 fingers in a factory, and that shot his, and he lived to be 100. And at 97 years old, I said, aren't you bitter about that you lost your 2 fingers and they withdrew the contract? He goes, well, you know, by that time, by 97, he was like, you know, accepted what had happened to him. Newspaper selling was very big. Newsies on the corner, and I had uncles that did that too, selling newspapers. So what I did is I made Francis the composite and had him in this book, and had him do all of them. He played baseball, he bootlegged, and so on. Near Turning Stone Casino, right down the road, were the shacks that were built that my parents had lived in the summertime. And this, let's see if I can get this. It's Because my aunt, she used to get on the bus at 97, 98 years old and go gamble in Turning Stone. So I would ask her about the shacks. What was it like? She goes, well, you could go see them. They're right down the road from the Turning Stone. And I'm like, I got in the car. I said to my daughter, we're going to see your parents, your grandparents' summer home. So this is what it looked like right here. So this one here is the side. So this turns out to be 10 little small apartments. You see there's 10 doors. So when you open the door, it was like about a hallway like this. And on one side was hay that the boys could sleep on, and the other side was hay that the girls could sleep on. A bare bulb in the place for light, no refrigerator, okay? And of course, no bathrooms. So then she told me about the outhouses. But if you're out in the fields and there's 40 acres or whatever, they can't put outhouses everywhere. So people had to go in the fields or find the wooded area or something. So I peeked inside here, and this is what I found were all the bushels that were used back then, the pea picking and the bean picking. Anybody know what this is? Any guesses?
The smokehouse of some sort.
Close. It was the kitchen. And there was only one stove. You got 10 families to one stove. So when the whistle blew at 7 o'clock at night, it blew in the morning at 7, that you had to be in the fields, to 7 o'clock at night. It blew that they would just line up with the moms would line up with their kettles to try to get a burner too. Now, I took a lot of pictures of these, and I'm so glad I did, because a year later, the farmer, the same family that my parents worked for, Hinman, they knocked him down. So I was really happy that I had documented them. The Hinman family has been around for like 5 generations. I tried talking with them. I knocked on their door. I emailed them. I sent a letter to them. They did not want to talk to me about this time of their lives. So this is the girl next door here, next to him, and both of them, their parents needed their wages, so they had to leave school in 8th grade. Neither one of them could finish school. So he did not want factory work. He did not want to work on construction. He did not want to be like his dad. He wanted to get out of there. So the next best thing was to join the Navy. And I think a lot of stories I read about sailors, many of them joined the Navy just because they were hungry. And my dad would say, it's one less mouth for my dad to feed. So that's what he did. And this was the destroyer that he was on. It's called the USS Whitney, okay? And I love this picture because here he is working on building a torpedo and eating a sandwich. So he's like, I go, oh, you're multitasking there. And here he is working with his gyroscope. So it's just amazing to find these pictures in those boxes. And as soon as he signed up at 17 years old, okay, he had to wait till he was 18 to go. But that's when he decided to ask Lucy, that's the girl's name, to wait for him. If you wait for me, or if you write to me, that means you're my girlfriend. I guess that's the jargon that they used. So she agreed. So he talked to me a lot about seasickness. I guess either you have it or you don't have it. And he had to overcome a lot of seasickness. But he chose the Navy because they had 3 hots and a cot. You know, if you're in the Army, you've got a backpack of 70 pounds on your back and you don't know where you're going to sleep that night. You could be in a ditch, you could be in a field. But here on the ship, you have 3 hot meals and a cot. He loved Honolulu. He did end up, he was in Atlantic, but then the last 3 years after that, he went and ended up in the Pacific. And he loved liberty, and he even saved, right here, he saved his Liberty card. You can't get back on the ship without this. So no matter how drunk you get, you gotta make sure you have that card on you. You cannot get back. So he gets caught in Honolulu, and he gets there in July, and by December is when the Japanese surprise attacked, okay? After that, he was home for a while, and then they sent him to Alaska. And Americans didn't know this, but the Japanese had occupied 2 islands in the Aleutian Islands, Attu and Kisku. And so they had to blockade the Japanese that are in those islands. Then the Japanese blockaded the blockade and starved them out. For 9 months, there was only bags of rice left for them to eat. And so they couldn't get supplies in. So growing up, I learned he didn't want to look at rice. He never would go near rice. So that was part of it. Okay, so this is just, I just took part of the article, the newspaper article of him telling us about Pearl Harbor. And this is his warship. It's a destroyer. And this is him right here, okay? That's with his men. So what I'd like to do is just read what happened. What I did is I let me go back. I got his story, and I got the story of other sailors, and I just kind of put the story together of what happened that day. It's only a couple pages. Okay, so he went to Honolulu that night on Liberty, okay? So early the next morning, I relaxed in my skivvies on my bunk. Too early to get dressed. It was Sunday. Shipmates were snoring. Hold on, I have trouble. Some after partying in Honolulu, some after working. I gotta put the light on my camera. So early the next morning, I relaxed in my skivvies. Some were snoring, some were after partying in Honolulu, some after working a late shift. Others were catching up on answering letters or preparing for church services. Ski, our insomniac, wandered between the men's bunks. I can't sleep. I can't wait for Liberty this afternoon. Do you think I'll go to a luau? I'm trying to get some shut-eye, Ski. Why don't you read the ship's manual and report back some interesting stuff? I said, turning over a pillow over my head. Yeah, said Chubby. Give it a rest. You nervous? Ski did not respond. He stopped abruptly, standing motionless, staring, listening. Fingers to his lips. He whispered, Shh, what's that noise? The room was still. We listened. With no windows below deck, it was hard to tell what was going on outside. We heard planes thundering by. A machine gun began to chatter. Sounds of explosions followed. What the heck was that? I said, sitting up. Chubby dismissed the sounds. Probably air maneuvers on Ford's Island. Ski flipped open a hatch that was 3 feet above the ship's waterline. Stretching his neck to view the sky, he yelled, Wait a minute. Those planes don't have stars. They're red balls. Japanese suns. They're zeros. Why, they're Jap planes. Whoa, Jap planes everywhere. What the hell are they doing? They're bombing us. What? Are you sure? At that instant, air raid sirens blared. Our loudspeaker blared. Man your battle stations. This is not a drill. Searching for my work pants, I threw some items into the air. I couldn't find them. Heart pounding, breathing fast, men scrambling by me. Leave close behind. Get to my gun. On my way up, I spotted Chubby, trembling. Chubby was his friend forever for a long time. I met him. I can't find my other shoe. It's okay, Chubby. Forget him. I reached for his arm. Come on, we can do this. Chubby snapped to and followed me up the metal stairs. His confusion surprised me. He always seemed so confident with sea life. I guess it was my turn to look out for him. On deck, I gazed up at the sky. Japanese planes looked like pelicans flying in formation until they dove and circled above our heads. More explosions. Fire. Half-naked sailors ran on deck to their stations. Our guns could not be armed in friendly waters. That rule cost us valuable seconds to load them. As captain of my gun station, I pivoted around to view the harbor and saw that our guns were pointing at our own closely docked ships. "Our ships are too close together. We're going to shoot one another," I yelled. "What do we do now?" shouted Ski. Bombs dropping and whistling over the harbor. Worried about friendly fire, I ordered, "Aim your guns vertically upward. When you spot a plane, rapidly fire just ahead of it. It might fly into our bullets." It was a good idea, but we found it hard to coordinate the triggering in time for the fast-moving planes to fly in our line of fire. Confusing orders made it hard to switch tasks. "Extinguish fires," boomed the loudspeaker. Barefooted, we left our battle station, sidestepping hot spent cartridges that bounced on the ship's deck. I spotted a second formation of enemy planes heading for another attack. Another change in orders. Battle stations. I ran back to my gun, repeated to my men, "Aim upward." A few planes were hit and spiraled into the harbor. With all the bullets that were fired, it was hard to tell who shot which plane. Everyone got trigger happy, shooting at any plane. "Oh no," yelled Ski. "Someone just shot down one of our own planes. This is crazy." A Japanese pilot flew so low that I saw his face grinning at me. It was hard to appear tough in my underwear. As if to say, "Watch this," and he released an aerial torpedo into the water. The fish beelined to the port side of a nearby battleship, blowing it to bits. Badly burned men screamed as their bodies scattered high into the sky like fireworks, some landing in hot, oil-slicked water. Ships sputtered billions of smoke, listing sideways from the impact. Gun turrets and ship masts were replaced by rubble and wreckage. Until the day I die, I will never forget how the USS Arizona exploded. I later learned that 8 bombs were dropped on the battleship, one heading straight down to its magazine, the ammunition room. An explosive chain reaction ignited cans of black powder, thousands of rounds of machine gun bullets, and all its torpedoes. I could no longer see the ship through the fire and heavy smoke. I watched fighter planes, dive bombers, and torpedoes capsize ships and turn American planes into ruins. Strafing bullets, blown up buildings, bomb craters everywhere, and killing of our young men, even civilians. For a few seconds, I stood motionless amid the chaos, frozen in time. I turned to Chubby. "My God, this is what war looks like." After 2 hours, buzzing planes disappeared into the clouds. I searched the skies for another attack formation, but all seemed quiet. We stared through the thick black smoke, blocking the harbor's serene waters and blue Hawaiian sky. My knees weakened at the sight of stately battleships, crushed decks, sounds of men's cries, smells of fire. It was difficult to breathe. Our island paradise became hell on earth.
That's great dialogue.
Thank you.
Dialogue is great.
Some of it was from the article that I passed around. Okay, and I love maps, and I'm curious as to what it all looked like. Has anybody been to Pearl Harbor, the Hawaii? Okay. So they still do this too. They put all their eggs in one basket. They put all of their ships around it in the harbor. So this is Ford's Island, and there was planes here. Okay, here's the Naval Hospital down here. Okay, and all along here, these are battleships. Battleships are named after states. This is Battleship Row. And here's the red one, the Arizona that he was talking about, okay? Now, his ship was in this cluster and this flotilla of destroyers, okay? His was the USS Whitney right here, so he was kind of first. So you could see he had a really good view right here of the battleship. Over here, which I found interesting, was the USS Solis. And it was a a mini hospital. So if anybody got injured over here, they can go here to get help instead of having to go all the way down to the Naval Hospital, okay? And this is what amazes me about, I mean, you have bullets strafing at you, and I mean, the first thing you want to do is just run and get away from it. But some of these people grabbed a camera that always amazed me. Even the Japanese pilots had cameras on them and took pictures as they were flying around. And so this one guy on the Solus just picked up his camera, and in seconds, he had it focused on the Arizona. He's got a picture of the Arizona actually blowing up. Okay, and I'm gonna show it to you. But in 1986, if you can remember when the Challenger blew up, okay, my brother was in Florida at the time, okay? I guess he was on the golf course or whatever. So I called him that night. I said, oh my God, did you see it? How awful it must have been to watch it blow. He goes, yeah, we watched it blow up. And he goes, you know, not to diminish it, but it was nothing compared to watching the Arizona blow up. So he had watched in the 20th century 2 major disasters he had witnessed. So let me get on to the next picture, which I think is an amazing shot I got on the National Archives. This was a picture taken by a Japanese pilot, okay? It's in black and white. And here, this is Battleship Row here, okay? This is the first bomb that was dropped in Pearl Harbor when they first started. And he captured that, which I just think is absolutely amazing. So if I can get this, I'm hooked up to your Wi-Fi. You can go on YouTube. And I don't know if you've ever watched World War II in color, because most World War II footage is all black and white film. But if you watch World War II in color, they colorized the film. So this bombing was colorized, okay? So this is what the men saw when they looked at the Arizona. It's not much, it's only a few seconds. I gotta figure out how to get back. And again, the National Archives documented lots and lots of pictures. Again, there's a lot of journalists photojournalists that took pictures. And this is the next day. This is what these sailors saw the next day. The ruins and the disaster. These are oil fields here that were bombed, so that's where the black smoke is from. And the oils was slicked right into the harbor, so men that are thrown out of their ship landed in the hot, slick oil. Okay, so they either died because of the oil. Many of them, you know, if they had their white uniforms on or whatever, they'd come out all black. Dory Miller he wasn't on the Arizona. I mean, they made a mistake in some of the movies. He was on the West Virginia, which was nearby, and the West Virginia had capsized, okay? But he jumped onto the Arizona and nearby, and he was, like most African Americans, were trained to be mess attendants. They were, and he wanted someday to own a restaurant, so he didn't mind working in the kitchen. Was not trained on how to use a gun, but he ran and figured out how to use a gun, and they figured that he alone helped bring down 1 to 5 planes, and they made him quite the hero. And he was a good friend of Joe Louis's because he also was a boxing heavyweight. And so Joe Louis kind of took him under his arm, and he became very, very popular. The sad part, here he is being, given a medal for what he did, that day. But when his ship went on to the Gilbert Islands, it was torpedoed and he died. He didn't make it. But in 2032, okay, there is going to be a new aircraft carrier called the USS Dory Miller. So and that's when my father stopped talking, so I know what he did on the day of Pearl Harbor, but what did he do the next day? What did he do the day after that? He was there until February, okay? So, reading up on it, so what they had these young guys do, they were 19, 20, 23 years old, their first week was search and rescue. So they had to go through and get bodies out of the water, pull bodies out of the water that are stuck in the water or in the oil slick. A lot of times they would pull and their hands would come right off. That was that hot, oil slick. To identify them, they had to just fingerprint the hand to find out who they are. Unfortunately, some of the doctors, the hospital was just, the local hospital was filled, that they had to, almost play God and decide who's worth saving, and, if they were too far gone, they'd have to leave them and just move on. After search and rescue, there was search and recovery, which means that they just then have to start getting bodies out of the water, and after 2 weeks or so, they were so bloated and filled with water that they couldn't fit in their rowboats, so they would tie their feet and then just pull them along. So, and we're talking close to 2,000 people dying. So that's one of the things my students ask, so what do they do with the bodies? You're in war now, so who's got time to do that? But they did. They made time. They had to have a makeshift grave for all of them until they could bury them honorably. This I found in the box, and notice the date on this postcard. Can you read that? December 11th. Okay, so it's 4 days after Pearl Harbor. So he must have just mailed this off because the people back east had no idea. Even some didn't even know where Pearl Harbor was. Hawaii was not a state. It was not a honeymoon place to go to at the time. It was pretty much taken over by the military, and of course for pineapple and from corporations and stuff. So this is the letter that she received, and it starts out, it doesn't even mention what happened. It just said, haven't heard from you in a long time. I want to write, but sometimes I won't be able to until now and then. I still feel the same about you, etc., etc. And if you look here, this was stamped by a censor. So there were rooms filled with desks and desks and desks of censors, and their job was to read thousands of pieces of mail, making sure that the soldiers and sailors did not say anything giving away where they are, okay? So he knew it wouldn't be passed by the censor if he mentioned the surprise attack. So he just talked about, I hope everything's going okay. It was just like nothing happened. But I just thought it was an amazing piece of history that I found. And I thought you'd find this interesting, the immediate toll, what happened here. So there was 18 ships sunk or severely damaged. Notice that most of them were battleships. There's two things in their orders the Japanese were given in their orders, is to get the battleships and the planes, okay? Yes, there were some destroyers and cruisers and stuff that got bombed, but their main job was to destroy the battleships, okay? Aircraft carriers were the ships of the future. There were no aircraft carriers at Pearl Harbor at this time. They had been quite a distance away. Here's the mass grave that they put together, just to get them buried quickly. And it wasn't until 1948 that they created this National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, okay? And every parent was given the option of having their son sent home to be buried at home, or to be left at the National Cemetery. And that is the case in Europe as well. Like in Normandy and stuff, we still have hundreds of, as you know, soldiers that are buried there. But some parents opted to have them brought home, and so at the expense of the government. In my book, and I don't know if I'll have time to read it. I don't know how much time I have. What time is it?
It is almost 2.
Oh, okay. I won't have time to read it. But in one of the search and recoveries, this is the West Virginia, okay, and it was pretty much capsized, but they were able to rebuild it later. But this absolutely just blew me away, is these 3 guys were partying in Honolulu the night before, okay, and at the tables, they had big band music playing, and at the tables there was always a woman taking pictures, can I take your photo? And she would take it, but then if you didn't want to buy it, you didn't have to buy it. So they said, no, we don't want it, we want to buy it. But this man, his name was Clifford, he was stuck in a pump room, after the ship sunk. They could not get out. He and 2 other guys, not these 2 guys, but 2 other guys. So there was 3 of them stuck in there. They tried to blowtorch on another ship to let guys out, but it blew up with so much oil and paint that it would not have, they would have died anyway. So these men, tapping on, and pounding and then banging. And they were stuck in that pump room for almost 2 weeks, okay? And once they died, and once the West Virginia was brought up for repairs, they found a calendar. There was some food in the pump room, but they didn't make it very long. And the sad part is that their parents were told that he died on December 7th during the bombing, which was not true. And it didn't come out until maybe 20 years later how they really died, that they starved to death. And the siblings found out, his siblings, and they chose not to tell their parents how their son really died. So I have a whole chapter on what happened here. But I looked it up, and I just can't believe I found this guy, and that's the one that was stuck in the pump room and didn't make it. So the next day, as you know, FDR goes before Congress and gets a declaration of war. Okay, so war is declared on December 8th. And so the Pacific Theater begins. And the strategy, of course, is to island hop closer and closer to Japan to try to defeat Japan. And it took how many years from Pearl Harbor? Pearl Harbor was 41?
45. 45,
right. Radar was invented then, and at first it looked like they called it the flying bed spring. It looks like a bed spring, but it wasn't very accurate at the time. But at least it was a way of detecting other vessels in the water before they start firing on them. And then sonar also came, and sonar has this ping, ping, ping noise when they sense that there's a vessel nearby. And this is a true story. They heard the ping, ping, ping. They saw the dark figure. They said it's right here, and they weren't sure what it was. It looked like a submarine. So they fired a torpedo at it. And this huge splash came up with blood all over the place. It was a whale that they had, because the sonar noises, the whales make very similar sonar noises, so they just assumed it was a submarine. And I kind of put that story in because, as you know, with war, there's collateral damage. I mean, kids get killed, and women get killed, and animals. And so the strange thing was the whales, I'm sure, didn't make it through a lot of this war. So I had an artist kind of do a map of the Pacific Theater. And okay, so here's Hawaii, Okay, here's Pearl Harbor, here's where the attack began, here's what started the war. So then they made their way this way, and here's Japan. Okay, so all of it, as you can see, the arrows are all pointing to Japan, to Island Hop, to close in on them. Now, here's the Aleutian Islands, here's Alaska up here, so here's where the Japanese had occupied 2 islands. They could not let that happen because they could have very easily attacked California from Alaska. There's still a lot of top secret stuff that the Navy will not release from Pearl Harbor. So I tried finding, but they just won't release it. Okay, so in the Navy log that I have, he was at Tarawa, which was a very, very brutal island. And the job on the destroyer is to bomb the hell out of the island, okay? And then for like 3 days, and then send the Marines in. But when they sent the Marines in, there was like 900 of them that got killed in the first day. So it just horrible war at that point. And so he also went to Guam. He was in Guam, which is still a strategic military place. Saipan, okay, and then the rest was Iwo Jima and then Okinawa. So Okinawa was like one of the last major battles, okay, and of course the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is what ended the war. But before my father went to Iwo Jima, he was pulled out and sent to, of all places, San Diego, and for officer training. So I don't know why they were, by this point they were in 1944 and 45, really needing men, but he somehow was pulled out. And that's a question that I'll never know the answer to because, I never thought to ask him that. Why they pull you out? Speaking of needing men, the Japanese also had lost 3,800 pilots, okay? And this is in 44 when they decided to do the kamikaze. And it's kamikaze means divine wind because centuries ago, a very bad storm had protected the Japanese from attack. And so they figured this kamikaze is their divine wind that saved them. So they think the kamikaze pilots will save them. And you could see them here. They shaved their heads, and many of them were very young. And this is just before they get on their planes. And what are they drinking?
Sake.
Yeah, right. So they, put some booze in you, get the edge off, and a lot of them, some of them would slice it. One thing I have in the book, they sliced an aircraft carrier in half. Okay, and then there's American bodies all over the place, and that's what the destroyers and the cruisers around, their job is also to pick up the survivors. But the sad thing about this one aircraft carrier is they had to bomb it themselves because they just didn't want it to get in the hands of the Japanese. So whoever was left on that ship also got bombed. This is an incredible photo over here. Again, this is from the National Archives. And I just, my knees got weak when I saw this. This is a kamikaze plane. This is nanoseconds before the plane hits this battleship. Okay, these are all Americans here. So now you're a photojournalist and you're taking this picture and nanoseconds later it hits. So I could never find out what happened here. So you can only guess, that the plane, sometimes they don't aim right, but they do as much damage as they could.
May I say something?
Yeah,
Just that I have a story relating to that.
good.
When my dad was in the Navy, a kamikaze plane hit their ship. But like you say, they don't always do what they're supposed to. So we now have a souvenir letter opener from a piece of metal off the airplane.
Amazing.
So I guess it didn't do any kind of damage to the ship.
Right. And I don't know if you've seen the military museum over here, but I was good friends with Ken Eaton, and he started his collection of World War II memorabilia by taking a knife off a Japanese soldier, and that's how he started his collection. And they're told, the Americans are told, don't take any souvenirs, but they do. They did. Anyway. Another thing he talked about was burial at sea. You've maybe rescued 50, 30 survivors, but there's a lot of dead people, so you can't have them on your ship. So the only alternative was to bury them at sea, and they would embalm them and then wrap them in the American flag and then just slide them. They had to have ballast. If it was a pilot that was shot down in the water, in one case they took a piece of the airplane and used it as the ballast to keep him in the bottom of the ocean, his own plane. This is Tarawa, and this is what they had to do. This is just a picture. There was 900 bodies that they had to bury. So again, it wasn't until after the war that they actually started making memorial cemeteries. This is just one, I'm going to take you over to, this is in Europe, and I didn't know this, but I'm sure you've seen the pictures of all the rows and rows and rows of this is my brother-in-law's uncle, and he was buried in the Netherlands, and I didn't know this, but the Dutch people there are still very, very thankful for what Americans did. That there is a list that you can be put on to adopt a grave, and then you decorate that grave every year. So this still goes on right now, and it just amazes me that they're still honoring our men. Okay, this is like one of the last. I had to show you this picture of the sailors returning home. I don't know how they got them all in there, but they did.
Always room for one more.
Exactly. I like, these are things that I find, and I just, the celebration in the streets, and this is post-war. Again, this is my dad. He became an officer. He was on another ship. This is post-war. Now, what he got stationed in the Mediterranean to guard the Mediterranean, and his ship was docked in Naples 50 years after his father left Naples to immigrate to America. So I thought it was just very, very interesting. But I'm looking at what they have here. First of all these guys look like old salts, and but these are GI beer. Now, beer was not allowed during the war. You were not allowed to have beer unless you were on liberty, okay? So this had to be after the war. This was like about 1950, 1951, and here's some money here. It looks like they're gambling or playing cards, but I really like this picture, but it is a post-war picture.
It's a watered down beer.
Sorry?
They gave you watered down beer. It wasn't what you normally would expect.
My father called it near beer.
Near beer.
Used to be 2% beer.
And when they were in Italy, when he was in Italy, that's what they would do to the wine too. They see these Americans coming, and he'd go in there and they'd order a bottle of wine, and the waitress yelled to the bartender to get this L'acqua wine, and L'acqua is water. And so he knew Italian, he spoke Italian very, very, and he went up to her and said, "Why are you giving us watered down wine?" So, then she knew he was Italian, and they got the good wine. So these are the types of stories that I grew up with, And this is the, this started appearing when I was preparing for this. This happened in May. This kid was 15 years old, and he died on the Arizona, and they just found his body, okay, in May 25. Same with these three. They thought that they would never recover these pilots and these soldiers, and they all came home. There are men whose jobs are today to go, and now that we have DNA, is to go and find out, get some bodies that are, of course, they're deteriorated, but they still can find their DNA. And they're finding lots of soldiers from Vietnam now, and they're bringing them home, and they're still finding soldiers and sailors from World War II. Those funds were cut this year. Again, this one, he lived to be 103. He was a famous ace pilot of the Pacific. And this man too, he swam all night, tied to 15 lives that were all injured. And so all these stories still come out. This was just in the last few months that I got these stories. And I've always been very, I'm not for war. I don't think war solves things. And this is what it does to our men. It's called that 1,000-yard stare, where they're just totally numb to everything. They've seen so much, their bodies can't process it. Last month, a Syracuse native came home from World War II. And the last Arizona survivor just died last month, and he said, I want to be buried with my shipmates. So they got a diver here, and they took his remains and had them bury it with his shipmates in the Arizona. I didn't know if you realize this, but in next year, America will be 250 years old. You probably remember the Bicentennial Minute on TV, when the Bicentennial in 1976. Well, now it's called the Semi-Quincentennial. And I thought this was interesting, that the Army and the Marines and the Navy are a year older than the Declaration of Independence. Okay, they were all formed in 1775. It was before our country became the United States, which tells me that in 1775 they were ready to fight. They were ready to fight the British to break away. Okay, thank you for listening. I have books here if you want to. If you change your mind and you want to, I know that you have some here. And also I have them on Amazon too, if you are interested in any of the books. Now, any questions? Anything you want to, or any, I love stories. So any stories you want to share? Would you like to share what we can see? I'll put the lights on.
Who's the young girl in the picture up there?
Yeah. She looks quite young there.
I just brought up some photos that my dad was in the Navy from 39 to 45, because he enlisted right out of high school. So at some point he was both in the Atlantic and the Pacific. He was on at least 4 different ships. And at one point in time, I'm not really sure what year this is, but it was his first time across the equator. So these just give you some idea of what it was like for these men to go from pollywogs to shellbacks. She said sometimes they had to wait and see what they wanted them to do. Well, these 3 right here look like they were trying to make him be a mermaid.
So I commented before on one of the literary aspects of the book, which I felt when I read it, and when you read it aloud, it's very engaging and amazing. It must be very difficult to write dialogue like that.
Because you can almost guess what they would really say, and in knowing the character, that would be something he'd say. So that made it a little bit easier. But, yeah, thank you. Okay. Anything else?
Just thought that both of the books were incredibly good. Just enjoyed them so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Same here.
I spent about 8 years on those 2 books, and I so lived and breathed a lot of their stories and stuff, you know, and I'm happy that I got them down, got the stories down.
I have another story from my dad. He was a boiler tender, and that meant that he was in the belly of the ship. And so they were always thinking about, you know, being torpedoed or whatever. But one of the fun stories he told us was, they had one man that was down there, and he would sneak up to the mess hall, and he would take steaks for them while they were on duty, and then he'd bring them back down, and then they would cook them in the oil that they were running the ship with.
Wow. That's, whatever works, right?
This is interesting, it looks like little pom-poms
Yeah.
put together.
There's a name for this, and
I've never seen
it didn't last very long. It only lasted, the rage only lasted a few years. So he put his initial F and L, Francis and Lucy, on that as well. That's why I grabbed it. I kept it, but
So those are little balls, right?
yeah,
like a pom-pom.
they're like pom-pom balls.
Yeah.
Again, there's another question for him. You know, when did you do this? You know, how long did it take you to do it?
You got lots of time sometimes.
Yeah, they do. They do. He became a real card shark. You know, he just really, and checkers. He would have one of his checkers against 12 of yours, and he would beat you up with one. He was that good, you know. So, but that's, you know, there's nothing else to do. Sometimes the boredom was you know, to make the time go by somehow. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you. My pleasure. I enjoyed it.